Thank you. It's always good to come together and pray, and it's good to be able to do that together in communion for this battle for life. Yeah. Our speaker today is Tom Condit. I actually tried to Google him, and Tom, I couldn't find a whole lot about you. So that either tells me you're humble or flying under the radar screen. So, and probably the latter, because the great work with which he has decided to take the skills that he's been given as an attorney and to fight for the pro-life cause. So I do know that Tom is from a very large family himself. I'd let you share with that. And many of them, if not all of them, involved with pro-life in some way or another. So Tom has been, again, an attorney. He knows the legal side of all of this, and he is going to walk us through and tell us about what is happening with Haskell and the Ohio Department of Health and that whole genre of things about that. Tom?
Thank you. I am always uncomfortable when someone says I know everything about the legal side of anything. But I am going to thank you very much. It's always really such an honor to be invited to speak to any group of pro-life people. I often say lawyers are overrated. I find that the activists can educate me way more than I can educate them most of the time. I come here, I'm one of my first year law school professors had a funny line when he was questioning first year law students who were maybe a little shy about sticking their neck out and trying to answer something. And he would say to them, go ahead, make a noise like a lawyer. And so I'm going to make a few noises like a lawyer here, but hopefully not too many. I will talk a little bit, I'll talk some about what's going on with the litigation involving Haskell's clinic down in Sharonville. It's now pending in the Court of Common Pleas. Before I get there, though, I want to just say a couple things. By the way, I was told to talk for about 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to get that. If it gets too cold, everyone starts running away, that's probably too. I'm still thawing out from the January Rosary March down in Cincinnati that we have every year. First thing that when I thought comments for today, first thing I wanted to do was apologize for the legal profession. There's a well-known line from Shakespeare, Henry VI, Part 2, where one of the characters says, the first thing we're going to do, let's kill all the lawyers. Yes. And that's an oft-quoted, and really I'm not a Shakespeare guy, but I've come to know it's really a misunderstood quote, because it was uttered by a character named Dick the Butcher, who was kind of a anarchist and a revolutionary looking to wreak havoc on society. And in the context of that, it actually was a compliment to the lawyers. The lawyers would be the ones who instilled justice in society and who would ensure the rule of law. And so in that Shakespearean context, it was a compliment to lawyers. Sadly, the opposite is now true. It's the lawyers and the judges wreaking havoc on society. And, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was privileged to meet the mother of Terry Schiavo, who everyone remembered 9 years ago during the Lenten season was starved and dehydrated to death by judicial order down in Florida. And, that's the first time it occurred to me. I apologized to her for the legal profession. And she said, for the death of her daughter, the murder of her daughter. And she said, no one's ever said that to me before. So I thought this might be a pretty good line. I'm going to use it again. So for everyone who has to spend parts of their days or months or years over and over standing out in the cold, sidewalk counseling and picketing and doing the political work and everything that's really such a burden to do. I apologize for my profession that this has been necessary, but it really is the fault of the judges and the lawyers who have let this happen. Of course, and that leads into the breakdown. Let me ask, how many, about 6 weeks ago, we had a little press conference down in Cincinnati when the court let Haskell's clinic in Sharonville stay open. And that went out on some link from Cincinnati Right to Life. Can you raise your hand if you saw that? All right, a few people did. So I don't want this just to be a repeat of some of the things I said there, but you know, I didn't know until I saw something about a new book that a pro-life lawyer wrote. I saw it a couple months ago. I had no idea, even though I read the case a few times in my life. It's hard to read Roe versus Wade, but I've read it a few times. It's been a long time. I didn't know until I read this recent little summary of a new book that came out that Roe v. Wade, it really went up to the Supreme Court on question of jurisdiction and a question of law. There was no factual record in that case. There were no witnesses, no medical testimony, nothing. There was never a trial. It just got up to the Supreme Court on this. I probably dismissed out of the lower courts. It went up to the Supreme Court on appeal. And on no factual record, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the laws of all 50 states effectively. It really was the law of Texas, but it effectively struck down the law of all 50 states. And did all this pontificating about medicine and life, and well, they had no facts to build on for that opinion. And so I was amazed to learn that. And you read the opinion, that doesn't jump out at you right away. What a lawless opinion that is, just for another reason. We all know all the other reasons of the lawless opinion. But the fact that they struck down the law of all 50 states, setting parameters for life and death of children at different stages of pregnancy with no record to go on, no testimony. Right? That's just a rogue decision. And the whole rule of law has broken down since then. And so I have been honored to, with some of you, be the victim of that breakdown of the rule of law. It's just torturous sometimes to see what the judges do and how the lawyers of the pro-abortion lawyers will say and do anything to get what they want. So it really is a sad state of affairs, and we live in what's I think been accurately called a judicial tyranny when you get into some areas of the law. And I've seen it lots of places, and some of you probably, if you're out here in the cold, you probably know a little bit about the saga of Phil Klein, the former Attorney General of the state of Kansas. And I've represented him in his appeal as they've taken his law license from him. And last week we filed a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court to review some of the ways they twisted the law and violated due process to take the law license from the only prosecutor in the history of the country who actually was willing to investigate and go after the crimes of Planned Parenthood and George Tiller out in Kansas. So that's been an extremely lawless episode in Kansas. After the opinion came out in October, they found that he had violated ethics in about 6 different scenarios, and we filed a motion for rehearing, which we're allowed to do under Kansas law. And we pointed out in that motion, it was 90 pages long, how the Supreme Court itself, while accusing Phil Klein of lying every time there was any ambiguity or lack of clarity in something he said or wrote, the Kansas Supreme Court itself misrepresented the record and misrepresented what he said about 6 or 8 times in their opinion. So they disbarred him for being dishonest, and the opinion just dripped with falsehoods. So it's diabolical that the highest court of one of the states in the United States of America could be so brazen about it. And so we filed a 90-page motion laying it out in great detail because they limited the size of our appeal brief. We couldn't begin to talk about everything in the appeal brief. So we talked about more of it after they made their decision, and the disciplinary administrator filed a motion right away asking for 30 additional days to respond to our motion because we really locked it down pretty cold. And we filed something quickly saying we don't oppose, we'll give them 30 days. And 5 days later, the Supreme Court of Kansas just denied the motion without even making the disciplinary administrator respond to all the falsehoods in their opinion. So that's the latest thing, and that's the latest trend we're talking about. They may now just want to go after the pro-life lawyers and get rid of us, which, whatever. But the rule of law, it's really just in shambles. And so, having said that, that brings us to what happened down in Cincinnati with the Lebanon Road Surgery Center versus the Ohio Department of Health. Now, contrary to me being served up as an expert in this area, it's not my case. It's not a case that, it's a case that basically the state of Ohio versus Haskell, or the other way around now. So those of us that are in private practice have just been observing this like a lot of you have. But the simple way to frame it up is to tell you where it's going is this. The Ohio Administrative Code requires all ambulatory surgery facilities to have a transfer agreement with a local hospital, and that of course is in case of emergencies, and of course it's for the health of the women, and that's the point, right? So of course Haskell moved his clinic from Cincinnati up to Sharonville 3 or 4 years ago, and for 3 years in a row he couldn't get a hospital, a transfer agreement with a hospital. And so the Ohio Board of Health did what they're permitted to do, and which happens in a lot of areas of law. They gave Haskell a variance, allowing him to stay open even though he was not in compliance with the law. So that went on for 3 years. And then finally, this past year, the Ohio Board of Health and the director said enough is enough. We're revoking the license, or we're not renewing the license. So he's not been in compliance with the law the whole time, and he got a variance for 3 years, and then finally he's been shut down. Now, and that's just to make a noise like a lawyer here, to make sure you understand it procedurally, because I understand people want to understand this. Typically, when there's a lawsuit, it starts off with the trial judge. In the county courts, it would be the Court of Common Pleas. And then the loser can take an appeal up to the Court of Appeals, and after that you go to the Supreme Court of Ohio. Well, this is an area of administrative law, where administrative state agencies adjudicate issues. So it's not even in the court. So there was a full hearing. There was a full hearing at the administrative level, and the Ohio Board of Health and the director were able to make the decision. That's really where the trial was. Now, as is true in these kinds of administrative law areas, the appeal from that then goes to the Court of Common Pleas. And so the Court of Common Pleas really is kind of sitting like an appeals court, and there's still the appeals courts above the Court of Common Pleas. But the important thing, and I actually want to get this right. I've litigated in this area once or twice. It's easier just to read you. The Ohio Attorney General's office, in my view, did a really good job filing a brief before Judge Metz down in Cincinnati, and I've got it here. And let me just read it, because it really just frames up in pretty simple terms what this case is about. Because understand, there's not going to be another trial. The trial has already been had. And now it's up to the courts to decide if the decision is unlawful or not. Here's what the Attorney General wrote in their memorandum to Judge Metz. This administrative appeal presents a single issue for this court's resolution: whether the Lebanon Road Surgery Center can prove that the Director of Health's licensing decision is unsupportable by reliable, probative, and substantial evidence, or is contrary to law. It cannot. The surgery center concedes that Ohio law requires it to have either a written transfer agreement with a hospital or a variance from that requirement, and it admits it has neither. Faced with these unchallenged facts, the surgery center has no chance of prevailing on the merits of the appeal. Now, that is all accurate, at least if the rule of law is in place. And I want to, so here's what the judge of the Court of Common Pleas has to decide. In other words, he can't look at it and say, I think differently, I would have decided this differently, I don't have good evidence. Here's the standard: whether there is reliable, probative, and substantial evidence to support the agency's judgment. It's a very deferential standard. This common pleas judge is not permitted under the law to step in and kind of retry the case in his own head. He's got to look at the record. There's a long transcript of the trial evidence. And if there's reliable, probative, substantial evidence to support the closure of that clinic, it should stay closed, even if he would have decided it otherwise. Now, but this is where the judges take over. And this is where they start kind of fabricating things about the right to abortion that we all know exists nowhere. So that's what's happening. Now, because there's not a trial and it's like an appeal, there's a briefing schedule. And I printed that off the website. Actually, I don't do websites. I had somebody else print it off the website for me. But the briefs, let me find it here. Give me just a second. It's happening soon. There it is. All right, the brief of the attorneys representing the clinic, that's due April 21st. The Attorney General's office will respond on behalf of the state June 2nd. The clinic can file a reply brief June 16, and the oral arguments will be held in the Court of Common Pleas June 30th at 10:30 a.m. So by the end of June, this will be served up to the judge. And, he's temporarily issued an order on no evidence to allow that clinic to stay open. And so we'll see if by the end of June or sometime in July, he's going to decide this and turn it back around, because the rule of law actually absolutely demands it. And, as I said during the press conference in Cincinnati, and it's a point I like to make, back in what I call the good old days, which was the days of Operation Rescue. Yeah. And, I really was honored to down in Cincinnati and a few times up here in Montgomery County. And I counted once the files that I kept. I keep all my files. I got files on all of you. By my estimate, I represented people, some people more than once, but probably about 200 times I stood in front of judges down in Hamilton County Municipal Court with the rescuers. And, there wasn't much of a defense we could put up under the law. They didn't want to hear what we had to say. But one thing that was almost always true is that the judges, if not the prosecutors, would always wag their fingers at, no one's above the law. If you disagree with the law, you have to work to change the law. You can't just violate the law. I heard that so many times. But see, now we see when the law doesn't work very well for the abortion industry, suddenly, that's what happened in this case. The pro-life movement did its job. They worked within the law. They elected officials and passed laws that were pro-life, and it all operated. And it came down and Haskell had to close. That was the rule of law at work. And this judge in Hamilton County just threw it aside and said you can stay open. So, I got tired of that finger wagging and them telling us all to, no one can break the law. Because I see the abortion clinics break the law all the time. Phil Klein was in Kansas. He had them dead to rights. They were not reporting required evidence of child abuse. They were running cover for the child rapists, just giving abortions to the 15-year-olds and sending them out home. Tiller was doing illegal late-term abortions under Kansas law. He had them dead to rights. And the judges just stepped in, and it just all broke down, and now Klein's lost his law license, and, Planned Parenthood's run free. So I don't really like hearing about the rule of law from people in the abortion side of things anymore. Or for judges, that matter, half the time. They don't follow the rule of law. So anyway, that's, in my humble opinion, what we're dealing with here, and why we have to keep standing out in the cold every year to have our little rallies and 40 days for life and all that. Now, so in closing, I always had, I guess from my earliest days of law school, I've always had a special spot in my heart for the picketers and the sidewalk counselors. And there's a lot of things going on in the abortion battle. But I've always had a special place in my heart for those that go out to the clinics day after day, year after year. And really I just think God has really given a special grace to those people who really can just do it in the long run, not just week after week and month, but year after year. And so I like to say a couple things. I've had a few opportunities to address crowds like this in the last couple of years. One is, and I don't usually like to invoke names and embarrass people unless they've really earned it, but just for this community, Vivian Scovart is not getting any younger. She's not going to be a teenager forever. And we really need more ground troops. And my wife, by the way, who's not here today, but she's been doing it for 20 years too. And, we really need the influx of the young people to come in and be committed to stay in it for the long run. Because there really is a special kind of soul that can stay in it for the long run. I know how I don't pick it as much as I used to. Shame on me. But I know, I was watching, this past week I was watching the movie A Man for All Seasons. The story of St. Thomas More, who lost his head in defense of marriage. And it was the best picture of 1966, by the way. If you've not seen it, get that. But there's a scene in there, and as I saw it, I couldn't help but think of the people who do the picketing and the sidewalk counseling, and to some extent also all the other actives. I don't mean to leave anyone behind. But there's a scene where Thomas More is talking to this ambitious young fellow named Richard Rich, who wants a job in government and in the courts. And Thomas More recognizes him as an unprincipled and maybe corruptible young man. And he will not give him a job in the courts. But he said to him, "I've got a job for you as a teacher." And he said, "You should go where you're not tempted." And Richard Rich says to him, "A teacher?" He says, "Yes, a teacher, Richard." He says, "You'll be a good teacher, maybe a great one." And Richard Rich says, "But who would know?" And Thomas More says to Richard Rich, who later betrayed him and was the key witness in getting him executed in the Tower of London. He said to Richard, "Who will know? You will know. Your friends, your students, God will know. That's not a bad public." And I can't help it. I watched that this week, and I thought of the picketers, and I thought, because I know how thankless it can be. There's got to be those days or those weeks where you feel like no one took any of your literature, no one wanted to hear anything you had to say, everyone driving by didn't even look at you. And there's got to be those moments where you think, why am I here? Am I really doing anything good? And I just want to encourage everybody, from someone who doesn't picket as much as he used to, you know what? Keep in mind, God will know. And that's what matters. So God bless every one of you. It's always an honor to come talk to pro-life people.
I just want to say one thing. I've known Tom since probably the early 90s, 91 or so, and his father also. We call him the rescue lawyer, because he knows exactly, his life is rescued. He knows exactly what's going on, and they do this for nothing, okay? They don't get anything. Every now and then we throw them a couple of pennies, but they absolutely get nothing. So I just want to tell you, he's our hero. He truly is. He's been with us really for a long time. And so I just want to thank Tom. Well, he knows how I feel. I want to thank him so very much. And his father.